Next, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Ruth Schiller to give a presentation on some work that she's doing with colleagues around the world. This is going to be a very interesting one, shifting a little bit away from the dynamics of the offender and more broadly to the internet. So, Ruth, take it away.
Yeah, just let me get started here. Does everyone see my screen okay? Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing us to share this. It's exciting to be here. Great points that everyone has brought out. And like Tom was saying, this is a little different approach, more at the meta level. And I work with a team that's based out of Oxford University, even though I work at Michigan State. And we look at the global level, what is happening to get this going the right way. So what is happening around the world in building resistance? As we are all here today looking at how to improve cybersecurity, we know it's an imperative. And as we've recently seen in the United States, cyber attacks can lead to ripple effects that have wide impacts. And building cybersecurity capacity means to have resilience within the whole nation or at different levels, resilience to withstand the cyber threats and minimize harms. So the Global Cybersecurity Capacity Center is based at the University of Oxford. It's unique in that it brings together international expertise and representatives from multiple sectors and various disciplines. So it's truly interdisciplinary and international. And they're looking at the effects and impacts of what cybersecurity capacity is and the impacts that it has, and especially working with countries that are not traditionally seen in a lot of research, a lot of developing countries, sub-Saharan Africa, South America, Oceania. So it's really exciting to see what's happening in countries that are basically starting to really go online. So as we've often heard in management, you can't manage what you can't measure. So one of the first things we needed to do was to work out with all our global partners measures that would work across cultures and across nations. And I want to also thank our strategic partners because they have helped us not just financially, but expertise and helping work make everything happen. Some of the organizations like the World Bank has offered a lot of consultancy and help. The OAS offers and shares a lot of their resources and data, and of course, all the other funders. The tool that we use, it's rather scalable. We call it cybersecurity capacity maturity. And we look at 5 different dimensions. One is cybersecurity policy and strategy. The other is cyber culture and society, as well as cybersecurity education, training, and skills, the legal and regulatory frameworks, and the standards, organizations, and technologies. So these 5 different dimensions, each dimension has many factors, and each of these factors have many aspects, and each of the aspects have many indicators. So as our teams go out in the field and meet with focus groups and meet with leaders, they look at all these indicators to look for elements of cybersecurity capacity. The other thing we look at is the levels. So there's 5 different levels. Startup, like just starting to engage in these different measures. Formative, established, strategic, and dynamic. Where dynamic would be the most developed, where it's very mature and resilient. And as the people here are probably not surprised, most of our countries were far from dynamic, but we're more of the startup level. But the stakeholder clusters that they interview are people from criminal justice, from the defense and intelligence agencies, from academics and civil society, government leaders, legislators, IT professionals and CERT professionals for nations, and critical infrastructure. So all these groups meet for at least 2 sessions. So each group would meet in different sessions, addressing different dimensions and discussing how they feel cybersecurity capacity is doing in their country. We were surprised happily about the level of brutal honesty that people were sharing, frustrations they had, or the triumphs, or what they felt they needed to do. And each country was able to reflect the goals and needs within their own country. And then as a result, the output is the team that goes from our centers to meet with these different country leaders and focus groups, builds a review. And this review is given back to the nation and all the different stakeholders. And they look at maturity per factor, and the ownership lies with the country. Now, most of the countries have chosen to allow us to produce the reports publicly and share them publicly, although some countries have elected to keep it private. So in this analysis, we were able to use the anonymized data, but we are not able to share all of it publicly. Also, they looked at clear steps and actionable steps to improve their capacity in each country. So they get a list of what to do next. So this is helpful not just in helping us assess everything, but also in helping each country and stakeholder group to know what to do next to protect themselves and increase capacity. But then again, as you can see, this is a very expensive process of just evaluating all these nations. I think I don't have, well, we have about 85 countries where we've done these evaluations now. This data analysis is based on 73 of those countries, as we had direct variables that were not part of the measurements. But as you can see, it's very expensive, and countries want to know if they're going to have a return on their investment, because like politicians, and they have a fixed budget, and if their constituents want a school or cybersecurity, it's easier to see the impacts of a school or something visual that's in their community. It's harder to see the impacts of something more intangible like cybersecurity unless it fails. We always see the results when it fails, but we don't realize how often it's working. And that's costs a lot. There's a lot of investment in keeping things working well. So we wanted to demonstrate that there was empirical support for investing in this holistic, multi-stakeholder capacity building. And it's tricky to measure because some of these things take a lot of time. And as you saw, the dimensions cover many different aspects. So the theoretical framework had to take into account many different things, such as the size of the country, the total population, and the GDP per capita. So the size might be very imperative, like say China or India, because of the amount of internet users. And the GDP per capita also might influence things greatly, such as Switzerland, which has a smaller country but a much higher GDP per capita. We also looked at the number of internet users, as well as the percentage of population that uses the internet regularly. Because you might have a country like India that has a lot of internet users, but the percentage of the population is very lower that uses the internet regularly compared to like Kuwait or a smaller country that has a much higher internet penetration and use. Then we looked at our scale that was calculated from the data from these national reviews. We went over each item and reviewed with our team and made sure of the validity of each of these items. Then we looked at our outcome variables, data that was gathered by the World Economic Forum, part of the World Bank, that included the business usage, government usage, individual usage of the internet for commerce, also voice and accountability, and negative experiences such as malware encounter rates, and piracy. And then we looked at, these are the countries that are in the sample. We had 31 from Latin America and the Caribbean, 15 from Sub-Saharan Africa, 14 from Europe, 9 from East Asia and the Pacific, 3 from South Asia, and 1 from the Middle East. And overall, the income was quite balanced. We had 11 that were high income, 33 upper medium, 21 medium, and 8 low. And again, this is very unique analysis because most of the analyses that look at cybersecurity attacks and capacity tend to focus on the higher income countries. And this one actually gets a good sample of a broad range of countries. Here's our countries I was looking for. And here's a little map showing some of the countries we have worked with so far. Some of them we've actually come back and worked with two or three times now, like such as Bosnia. And it's really encouraging to see the growth and changes since our last review. We looked at 2 statistical methods to test our model. First was just OLS regressions, very traditional to look at the impacts, and then also use structural equation modeling and path analysis because we felt that it showed more causality and was able to demonstrate paths better. And the results with both methodologies was consistent. And as you can see, the overall, our cybersecurity capacity building was pretty low, just past the formative stage. The range was quite wide, from 1 to about 3.28. And we also found this was really interesting, the divide, that there were many countries that were low on income, like in Sub-Saharan Africa, and also low on cybersecurity capacity. But in Latin America and the Caribbean, we had quite a range of the GDP per capita as well as the capacity scale. So there were some countries that were very high in GDP per capita, but their security capacity was very low. Others that had lower income were actually outperforming in capacity building. And that was quite interesting. And we're doing a subsequent analysis and looking more deeply at the regions and cultures to see why some areas are performing better than others. Then we tested our measures against other indicators that are pretty widely accepted, such as the Global Cybersecurity Index by ITU, the Network Readiness Index by the World Economic Forum, and also just an IT measure of secure servers published by Netcraft. And as you can see, all of those were pretty strongly correlated with our measures. The results of the regression analysis showed that the CCS was strongly and positively tied to individual usage, business usage, and government usage, and also voice and accountability. We found that, as you can see there, wealth was also tied. It was not as strong as we thought, except for business usage, but it really didn't impact that wealth usage as strongly. Centrality was tied to individual usage, but it was very weak, even though it was significant. And kind of parsing it out a bit in the path analysis, as we looked at piracy issues, it was very strongly and negative to piracy, the capacity scale, which was good, and even more so than wealth. So the impact it had on lowering piracy was more than just people having more money to buy real software. And piracy is an issue, as you know, because it can often have malware in it. It doesn't receive security updates. So pirated software becomes a real vector of a weakness in systems. Then we looked at economic use, and this was very encouraging as well, where the capacity indicators had a very strong and positive relationship to use, even stronger than the economy itself. So looking, kind of summarizing it, the nations in the sample were mostly in the early phases of capacity building, which is not surprising, especially looking at our sample that was quite broad. And the capacity was shaped by the scale and diffusion of the internet along with the wealth of nations. So there definitely was a digital divide even in the cybersecurity protections. But it was interesting that national choices on building capacity had implications for end users, citizens' perception of freedom to speak online, as well as vitality of ICT adoption and usage. So there are countries that are kind of overperforming as well as underperforming as far as building in cybersecurity capacity into their infrastructure. And overall, we saw that cybersecurity capacity needs to be prioritized in the political agenda to address the global cybersecurity gap. For many of our focus groups, there was a lot of concern that countries that didn't prioritize it politically and legally were left at a weakness because there isn't always financial incentive to protect until it's too late and things have happened. So, thank you.